So thank you very much. I know quite a few of you. There's a few unfamiliar faces, but that's awesome. I'm glad to see some new people out. That means I can go into some detail on our past projects and look at what we're doing here. So this is our probably 7th or 8th year of doing dryland grain corn here in southern Alberta now, which is pretty exciting. I actually had to go back to some talks from 3 or 4 years ago to remember some of the previous research we've done, because we've been at this for quite a while now, and it's pretty exciting. So this project was funded by CAP and continued for 1 more year through ARDAR. We've been looking at dryland grain corn, hemp with planters. Carlo's going to talk about strip till canola as well, and we've been working with pulses that we're not going to show today. So it's a pretty exciting continuation of things. I'm by no means a grain corn expert. But I have been doing this for quite a while, so if you can stump me, I'll try and ask around, and hopefully there's a few of you in the crowd that can maybe answer some of those tough questions. So just a quick little fun thing this morning. Maybe I'll ask, any ideas what's going on here? Anybody seen a blue corn plant before? It is some beautiful corn art. Carlo spray painted this 1 week ago exactly with some blue paint. And this is one of those little TikTok trends or viral things. And what this is showing how much the corn plant will move in 1 week. And it's giving you an idea of really where that growing point is. And you know, with corn, the growing point starts down below the ground. Obviously the seed's in the ground. And once you get up to about V4, so you've got your true leaves down at the bottom. There's kind of a thumb leaf. There's the first one you'd count, that kind of rounded leaf. And then you count all the leaves with a true collar, and that's your staging. And so, you know, after about V4 on the new hybrids, V6 on some of the older stuff, that's where the growing point moves up above the plant. And so all this green plant material here is all the new growth we've had in literally a week. I imagine that this was gonna die, but with all that new growth, it probably would have lived had we not pulled it up out of the ground. There's so much new green material there. So corn is a pretty fascinating plant, C4 plant. And there's some really interesting things that we see when we're growing dryland grain corn. So is there anyone, farmers here in southern Alberta, have you tried out grain corn, or specifically dryland grain corn at all? Anybody growing corn at all or advising on corn? Is it irrigated, silage?
No, silage and grain both.
Yeah, okay, so silage around here tends to be what, 30 inches? 15 to 30. The challenge with the 15 though is silage is maybe okay, but we don't really have a lot of headers to pick up 15-inch corn. So we have a visitor coming in later today. That's Chris from the UK. He's been tagging along with Ken. He's a Nuffield scholar, and he had some really interesting things to share. In the UK, they're doing a lot of similar work to what we're doing with grain corn. The big difference there is they have 40 inches of water a year. And talking to folks around here, it's actually been a pretty decent year for moisture, but it's come in some pretty large bouts of 2 inches in a day or whatever it may be. And we're lucky. The site here evaded kind of any damage, and then we've got this site is replicated in Enchant and Boylan this year, and I think cumulatively we survived the hail damage and stuff by about 3 or 4 kilometers in each direction on both of those trials. So pretty fortunate to still have these plots up and running here. So, you know, a little background. 2015 to 2017 was the first year we really started looking at corn agronomy, and we focused on 3 trials. You may have been familiar with them. One is a plant population and row spacing trial. One is a nitrogen fertility trial, and one was a tillage and residue trial. So, you know, we're well aware that there's a negative mycorrhizal correlation with growing corn on mustard or canola, and we saw that within those trials. And so, yeah.
And sugar beets.
And sugar beets, yeah, for sure. So we didn't have sugar beets in our trial, but so we saw that the stubble wasn't a huge issue unless we were growing it on mustard or canola, and then we saw yield reduction. The other thing we found that was our emergence counts really suffered if we were growing on, if we were going in direct till or direct seeded we had some issues with emergence, but once we cultivated, it really didn't matter what stubble we were going on because we were going into a nice even seed bed. And so, you know, corn on corn or corn on something with a lot of stubble, direct seeded, was an issue. And our planters that we use to plant this aren't necessarily, they're being adapted, but they weren't designed to go into direct seeded. So we'll have a look at that a little closer in a bit because there's some really interesting things we saw when we were touring here the other day. As far as nitrogen fertilizer, we're tending to put down about 100 pounds an acre. We found, you know, if we hit 100, 150 pounds per acre total, or up to 200 pounds per acre total, the corn wasn't hugely receptive or responsive, I mean, to additional nitrogen. And I think the reason behind that is just because we're so moisture limited. So ideally, we're expecting our dryland grain corn plots to yield anywhere between 80 and 100 bushels per acre. That, you know, compare that to some of the bigger fields, the silage yields or irrigated yields where you might be pushing 200, 250 bushels an acre. So we're not needing as much nitrogen requirements as maybe other folks would be. And then the plant population and row spacing, that's quite interesting because like George said, I'm really a big fan of narrow rows. We found that going from 30 to 20 had a really significant advantage. And then increasing plant populations also helped. And so, you know, with corn and dryland grain corn, we're really focusing on having one beautiful plant here. We want the tassel to come up, and we're looking for one cob and one chunk of grain on there. Once the corn starts tillering, we probably haven't managed it the way we want to. So that was pretty important for us. So compared to the UK with Chris, you know, he mentioned that they're seeding like 42 to 45,000 seeds per acre, which I thought was really, really high. And he said, you know, if they can get down to 15 inches, ideal. But again, most equipment's at 20, 22, something like that. So when we do plant counts here, we'll take a meter stick, all of our other plots, we'll lay it down, we'll count how many plants in a meter row. In corn, obviously, it's going to be the same thing, and we're only going to get 3 or 4. For them, he said if they can get up to 6 plants in a meter row, that's a little bit better. So, you know, you can see here our spacing's on 20 inches. We do have pretty uniform spacing kind of between everything here, but, you know, if they could tighten up the spacing between each individual plant, may be beneficial as well. And then starting dates, pretty interesting as well. So, you know, we're targeting 10 degrees Celsius for corn. Maybe 8 if there's a warming trend. And corn is kind of a, well, I say corn, but really a lot of plants aren't very strong when they pop out of the ground, to be honest. At 1 to 2 leaf, corn really struggles to compete with weeds. You know, it can really be damaged by some cold water on top, that frost effect. You know, see if you plant way too early, it'll actually start to curl and it'll get confused and it won't know what, you know, if it's too cold up top and the soil's nice and warm, all of a sudden it doesn't know which way it's supposed to be growing or germinating and things like that. So, you know, we've always been told that that's very important. But in southern Alberta here, I really feel like the last number of years, it's been really warm. And so we've been doing ultra early trials. There's really been a push to seed earlier and earlier. And I don't know if that's something you've all noticed or, you know, that maybe May 5th to 15th window often seems like it's later than it needs to be, and you could be going in sooner. So, I don't know, something to pay attention to, I guess. Any questions so far? All right, so, yeah. Yeah.
Have you done a tighter row spacing in your trials here, like the 6 inch instead of a foot?
No, haven't been able to get to 6 inches, and I think because it's grain corn, it'd be really hard to harvest.
About space between plant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Space between plants, yeah.
We've done the full range of plant populations as low as
about
15,000 kernels per acre all the way up to 40,000.
Okay. No.
And ironically, I think that the dryland side of things, and when I talked to some other corn experts from other areas, they expected that we could probably get away with really low seeding rates, like 15 to 20,000. But we actually found that even under dryland conditions, we were still better off in that 25 to 30,000 kernels.
Yeah, and I think that's just because
Shorter growing seasons, right? We need
Yeah.
we need the plant population to get canopy cover to intercept as much sun as possible.
Yeah, they figured a lower population, it's dry, that corn would really take off, and I think, yeah, like Ken said, we really just need to maximize the amount of land here. You can actually see, something we'll go and look at a little bit more, there's some really big differences between how much canopy cover is in each one of these plots, and so I'll talk to you about that a little bit after. So,
Mike, I have a question.
yeah,
So you said how early do you seed?
how early do we
Yeah.
seed? Well,
and
yeah.
then I'd also like to know the varieties you seeded
Yeah.
for the corn. And then my third question would be, this tries about strip till corn.
Okay.
So how was the strip done? Was it done maybe west to east, and then the seeding were done from north to west, or I'd like to know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll show you there right away. So I'm going to get on to basically all those answers right away in a second here. So yeah, so these PP corn plots, I guess we'll just move right on to there. So what we're doing in this new study now is we were looking at, can that strip till, so obviously we know that conventional is a nice system, but in dryland, southern Alberta, it's a challenge, and we'll show you some of the issues that we run up against. There's hairpinning, there's residue management. We don't get the consistency or the uniformity of the corn out of direct seeding necessarily, although in some cases, some locations and some years, we've seen improvements by direct seeding, like out in Medicine Hat, where the moisture is actually a really big issue. But we've been doing this study in Lethbridge, Tabor, Medicine Hat, Enchant, and Bow Island. This year we have Lethbridge, Enchant, and Bow Island. We're comparing the strip till and direct seeded, so that's our first main factor. We're also looking at extra early seeding, so we would call that like April 18th. A normal seeding is right at the beginning of May. This year it was the 9th, and then a normal or maybe even a bit later seeding May 17th. So at that point we know our soil's at 10 degrees. Going in early, it's probably 4, 5, 6 in some cases, or maybe even less. Compared to our ultra early Durham type stuff we're working on, where we're going in February or March. But so then we've got one factor with all the varieties. So we used a high and a low and a higher corn heat unit. So our first one's P6909R. That's a Pioneer Canola 1950 corn heat unit. So that's something that, it's pretty much as low on the spectrum as they sell in Western Canada. And we thought, well, if not knowing whether or not this is going to work, we figured we better have something on the low end just to make sure. And then we've got a P9740 AM. That's a 2250 corn heat unit. So definitely not on the higher end of the spectrum, but that's kind of was our thought. That would probably be the highest we'd want to safely go around here. Without pushing too much and still make sure we try and get yield out of the grain. So there's some really interesting differences between those that we'll go and walk along. So when are we strip tilling? Well, we've been doing this in the fall now, and sometimes you can get away with it in the spring, but a lot of producers in the United States and places, they'll go in the fall. You can even have the option to band your fertilizer down at the same time. And Chris was saying in the UK, what they'll do is they end up with either some sort of vetch or an Italian ryegrass, and they'll cover crop it first after their winter wheat, and then they'll come in and strip till. Oftentimes they'll do that once in the fall and again in the springtime, and that kind of just mellows it back out a little nicer to have that double strip till, although they're a lot more intensive tillage in the UK because of that 40 inches of rain. So I think here one pass is quite sufficient. And feel this soil right now. This is how rock hard it is just about in the fall. With that one strip till application, it's amazing how nice that soil was in the springtime. And the concept is that by doing that strip till, we're gonna warm the soil up a little bit quicker in the spring. And hopefully by seeding earlier, you're gonna be planting into warmer soil, and you're just gonna capture more of this sunlight. So if you wanna come down and check out this machine real quick.
How deep are you tilling?
How deep? We're trying to go at least 4 or 5 inches, like as deep as we're gonna maximally plant. So corn's usually, corn's usually at least 1.5 inches, ideally 2, and into moisture. You really gotta get into moisture. And we've had issues in the past where, with this kind of spring we've had here with variable rain and other things, you know, just that little 1/4 inch in either direction can really make a difference between how that corn pops up. Yeah.
For the precision planted stuff, so who's the funding partner for that?
Precision planted. This was originally funded through CAP, and now it's all through RDAR.
Okay.
Is transferred over for a 1-year extension. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Any other
Scott.
questions?
No, I was going to add a couple comments after
One
Scott.
thing on the UK is that it doesn't freeze. The soil
Yeah.
doesn't freeze in the
Yes.
winter, so
That's
so
probably
you
a
have
good
40
point.
inches of rain, but you also have
And they get a lot
You
of
ask
rain over
somebody,
winter.
how many growing degree days do you have there? They answer 365.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it is a completely different environment. But I wanted to mention that when this first came into play here in southern Alberta, Pioneer, all of the major seed companies, they're like, okay, we want Western Canada now to all grow corn because we make a lot of money doing that. But then it was a matter of, okay, so we're all zero tillage here. And corn production for the most part is done under conventional systems. Even to the day in Iowa, they've been doing strip till research for the better part of 20 or 30 years now, but the adoption of it is absolutely minimal. So it's still very much a conventional based system, whereas we're now trying to grow corn in a zero till system. So that was, you know, and it still is a barrier to adoption and to learning. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but unfortunately for them, they didn't get the adoption that they were expecting for, but farmers are always looking for alternative crops. What we found here though is that we want to make sure we maintain the conservation systems that we have to protect our soils. Whereas irrigation farmers here, we tend to have still more conventional systems, and we're seeing erosion, pretty severe erosion events. The last couple of years has been horrible. So now this is also an opportunity to say, bring in a slightly more conservation practice, say compared to Iowa, but for our general knowledge, it's actually going backwards. We're bringing tillage back in. But even under corn direct seeded, we're seeing erosion events. So this is an opportunity for us to incorporate a technique into other cropping systems in our irrigated soils that may actually be of benefit to help protecting our soils. On the flip side, I always find it's really quite interesting that, you know, Iowa's been looking at this. They haven't been able to get there, yet in the meantime, they've lost over a foot of topsoil over the last 50 years. So the difference is they have 2 feet of topsoil. We have 4, 5, or 6 at most. So we're a lot more fragile when it comes to our soils. But the good news is everything you learn about corn, you know, it has to be warm. Mike's saying what we're looking at here is how can we break into a zero tillage system without completely compromising the good work that we've done in zero till, but at the same time help deal with the issue of cold. You know, can we get in a little bit earlier? Can we use a higher heat unit corn because the soils are actually warmed up and get away with it? The problem is that doesn't really help with frost events, but we've been seeing some interesting results with it. Overall, what we've learned so far, though, I'm still kind of excited about corn as a dryland opportunity. Like even in some of the driest years, we're getting 100, 120 bushels of corn. Now, you know, that's pretty amazing. We always think of corn as being a real water hog, but it actually is incredibly drought tolerant. So I'm curious to keep going with this research. Even though the adoption's been low, it still provides us a really good alternative to our general commodities.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
Ken, due to low adoption of corn in southern Alberta, what do you think is advisable for you guys to look into cost-benefit analysis, so you can compare to traditional crop and then be able to provide evidence to producers? Growing corn, strip tilling, this is the benefits you are likely to achieve.
Yeah.
We must not forget that producers are also entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So as an entrepreneur, you always aim to be making profits to maintain your operations. So I would suggest this to you guys. If you can look into it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cost
And I think
benefit.
we already have a fair bit of data
Yeah.
on that, and there are some opportunities, but it's also challenging with the variation in weather that we've had too. So when you're flipping between severe droughts and severe floods, that's also a challenge. And then there's the equipment logistics that Mike has mentioned, is that we tend to farm on a much broader scale than the intensive corn farmers. So it's almost a bit of a culture shift. But as far as, the adoption of corn when it comes to silage for the feedlot industry, it's very good. And we probably have room to more improve both the conservation techniques and probably productivity on that front.
But the problem with reduced tillage with the livestock is that manure to get rid of, and you have to incorporate it.
You do not legally have to incorporate if you're a zero tillage
You
farmer.
talk to the NCRB people and
Yes.
talk to my clients then.
Yeah, and I will because I know the legislation, but you have to prove that you're actually a zero till farmer. You can't just decide, hey, I spread manure, now I'm a zero till farmer, right?
Tricky.
Yeah. Anyways, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, oh no, that's a good kind of segue, and it brings up a lot of points I kind of hadn't considered, but are really interesting to cover off. And so, on the conservation piece for sure, we've had years where we've had almost wrecks on our canola, or 20, 30 bushels, and then like Ken said, we've come out with 70, 80 bushel grain corn. I think the logistics are a huge challenge because this is a niche kind of thing, and so unless you've got a planter for seed canola and sugar beets and other things, and if you do that, you're probably focused on those crops and you don't care so much about the dryland corn. But yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
At the same time,
yeah.
when you grow a crop like this and you talk about zero till, you got a lot of crop residue.
Yeah.
You do,
So there's
and
another issue as far as
this one, I guess maybe you have to strip till your residue down after again. You already got that going.
bail it off and sell it.
That's
Yeah,
a
well,
tricky
those are
one, yeah.
agronomic issues that would need to be dealt with.
And like he was
Absolutely.
saying, I think probably those logistical and operational issues are often the bigger challenge. It's not necessarily the agronomy of doing it. The agronomy of doing it's pretty straightforward, and we've seen the results, and we can kind of show you the things. It's often operational. Yeah.
Okay, so
Sorry, at the back there.
I beat you.
Yeah.
Just a comment. One challenge you go into the narrower rows is the combine harvester headers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And but I know my interaction with the corn growers, dryland corn growers in North Dakota, Minnesota, it's almost all going to strip till
Good.
Yeah.
because that little bit of extra warmth in that tilled just makes a huge difference because they're going for higher yielding varieties, and
Right.
but they need that soil warm or it's not going to come up very well. And the fungal diseases.
Yeah, and
are
so
a challenge.
we haven't had much issue with pests, diseases, really anything in our corn, and probably because it is dryland corn and not intense irrigation. But you make an interesting point about the warm soils as well. So I know Adrian mentioned like a lot of growers, once you plant, they want that corn up in 48 hours, right? And if I look at our dates here, our operational dates this year, we we strip tilled everything in October-ish. And our early date was April 18th, I said. And when they went back May 9th to do that, our April 18th wasn't up out of the ground yet. So it's not like that April 18th popped out and it was up on the 20th or 25th. It still wasn't up 2 weeks later. It took almost 3 before it came back. And a lot of that was dry and whatever. Yeah.
Just
Tom?
one other extra, Dave, they used to have 2x2 sideband on the corn.
Okay.
On the planters, it's almost all gone. Because when they go to strip till, the phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, down in the fall when they're strip tilling, and then they plant and spread nitrogen in the spring.
And we're lucky with our machine. We have a monosem. I don't think we brought it out here, but it's we can plant corn. We've got sideband nitrogen that we can put down at the same time, and then it's got a liquid phos kit. So we'll put 1034 phos all at seeding. Do you want to take a quick look at the strip till? There's a few questions on it. So yeah.
I think the reason corn can yield so well compared to grains or other crops, it can take advantage of the later rains that might be probably too late for the other crops. They can keep on taking advantage
Yeah,
of those.
because as corn grows, it actually is using almost an inch a day, like 3/4 of an inch at some growing stages, and it's
I mean,
like
the later on that we put too late for canola or peas or whatever, and the rains, they were late mature, so they
Yeah.
take advantage of
It takes
that.
advantage of the sun too.
And
Like
it
our
likes the
crops are
heat.
senescing and there's still
Yeah.
good solar radiation.
the canola beside us is flower blasting from this 30+ degrees, and the corn's loving it. So it is a really good fit environmentally if you think about it. How much time do I have to kind of go through this versus the
I
planter?
would try moving a little bit though.
Okay, well I'll just go this way. We'll rip through the plots quick, and then Carlo can kind of show you the strip till things here. So these are really cool. We're seeing some interesting things, and I want to try and quiz you on You know, if we had 3 planting dates, date 1, 2, 3, low and high heat units, you can kind of scan across here. You know, pick out your favorite plot, pick out your least favorite plot. I've been told this is a really great looking corn plot.
I'll take anything that's tasseling now.
You'll take that. George wants something tasseling.
Otherwise they won't make it.
What about this?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You don't like this one? Well, this is obviously, I think, the 3rd date. So this is date 3.
So
But look how good, look how uniform it looks, look how consistent it looks.
So what's our average first frost in the fall, around September the 12th?
Oh, like October here last year. I don't think we got any frost until it snowed
So that one's not
October
going to be mature
30th.
by then.
So we have had issues. So that's where the big challenges for us come. So if I talk about kind of our outcomes on these trials, in Lethbridge, we have been hitting like 3,500, 5,000 kgs per hectare on these grain corn trials. And in general, our high heat units have worked the best. Strip till and direct seed, I'm not sure there's been a huge difference, but the earlier and extra earlier have been yielding a bit better than the normal for us. But when you move to Tabor, this is where George's comments come in. Our standard timing's barely finished, if at all. So we're between 1,000 to 3,000. We had massive differences in how our corn finished in Tabor. And in the Medicine Hat, extra early and like ultra extra early, those were the only ones that did anything. If we planted in May 15th in Medicine Hat area, none of that corn could finish and we couldn't get grain from it at all. You know, really beautiful green rich plants and everything, but grain just wouldn't mature. And even if you do get those frosts and other things, it's just mush and it was a mess. So you know, you make a good point on those. Some interesting things I want to show you here. So you know, talk about, this is a strip till plot. So we've used our machine, we've come through, we've stripped these rows in the fall and then direct seeded right back into them. And you'll notice how uniform this plot is. All the growth stages are the same. You know, there's kind of four outcomes: uniformity of emergence, plant timing, plant population, and evenness of spacing. So all those factors are going to contribute to the yield. So if your emergence isn't uniform, you could be losing 5-10% in yield right there. And that's because this corn gets so big. If you have a tiny one down here, it's shading out too much sun. It's not going to catch up. It never catches up. You know, one of the sayings I've heard is knee high by 4th of July. That's how you want to know you're getting the most coverage for your solar radiation. And you can see, like, if you look at this one here, it actually, there's a lot of shadow on the ground, not a lot of bare ground. You come back and compare that to this one here, I see a lot more bare ground there. This is actually date 1 strip till high heat unit. This is a big difference between these two. I mean, I think I'd choose left over right here. But George wants something tasseling, so let's go find something that's tasseling here.
If it isn't tasseling by the end of July, you're not going to get a crop.
Well, and so this is where our seeding dates and heat unit combinations kind of come into effect. So this is a date 1 low heat unit. They're already tasseling, they're already silking. But I wonder, compared to our higher heat unit, if our high heat unit might make better advantage. So we'll walk down a little bit further, but I don't think our high heat unit is quite tasseling yet. So we've got another week before the end of July. So that's where I was saying, you know, this one's going to be a sure thing. This was seeded early. This was this is date 1, so this was seeded April 18th. This was strip tilled, and this is our low heat unit corn. So I mean,
seeding corn April 18th?
No. But it looks pretty awesome. It's definitely going to finish. If we compare that to, oh, I covered these up and now I don't know where I'm going. So here's an interesting one, I think. Here's strip till. Well, there's 2 different heat units, but a date 2 and date 3. So this is our last date.
Hey, Mikey, if you're
Yeah.
talking away from the crowd, you
Sorry.
have to speak up, otherwise face us.
So here's an interesting comparison. So this one's a strip till, this one's a strip till. They've both been strip tilled. This is our date 2. This was May 9th. This is our date 3. This is May 17th. They look pretty much identical. That's because our latest, or our date 2 seeding date has the high heat unit here. our last seeding date has a low heat unit. So that low heat unit seeded later, popped out of the ground, caught up. Sean's telling me wrap up pretty quick. So those are interesting. We'll just go look at a couple more plots here, a few interesting things to look at. What did I want to see here? No-till. I want to show you guys this one right here. So here's what we're talking about, the differences between the strip till and the no-till. And this is something we've seen pretty consistently year to year. So this is date 2 again. This is the high heat unit, just like that one we just looked at. But this one's direct seed no-till. And you can see all the variability, like there's plants down low, up high. Another big thing you'll notice is this is where we end up with our gaps and spaces. And so I can come in, there should be a corn plant right here where I'm standing. Almost don't see that at all in the strip till. Our strip till has really even emergence. And if you go through these, you know, there's another gap there. There's another gap right here and right here where we should have plants. So we're really not on this system, not maximizing our corn plants. And I think, like I said, that's could be because of trouble with that seed to soil contact, just how those openers and everything work on our planter. So
And you got something else happening you don't want.
tillering, yeah, that's a good point. We talked about that. And when you have those spaces, you're going to end up with a little bit of tillering and other things as well. So you guys see anything else interesting here or have any questions on these?
I do, Mike.
Yes.
So you're talking about you end up with gaps from the seeder not operating correctly. Is that kind of what happened over there, where there are the 2 reps missing about 80% of
Oh,
the land?
no, that at the end, I think that was just practice, like kind of warm-up plots where we're lining things up, and maybe they thought there was corn there and there wasn't, or they turned the machine on and off, and it just gets surrounded with winter wheat. So we do really try and buffer these corn because of that spacing. There's really big edge effects, and so I should mention that when we harvest this, we trim off the outside rows on a 4-row plot. We're only going to keep the middle 2 to kind of get rid of that edge effect. And then just because this way faces west, we didn't put something here, but on all the other sides, we've got a large border going around to surround the corn. That's for wind protection, edge effect, and then unfortunately lots of times wildlife. And I don't know if anybody's had problems with corn, but the biggest problem we've had in the last couple of years is just like blackbirds and other things coming in. September, October, it's green. You get a snowfall in October and, you know, it's the only green thing left, so all the wildlife comes in.
And they love the green.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll peck everything right open, and you can only scare them off so many times a day, and the cannons and scarecrows and other things really don't work that great.
So, Mike, these are replicated 3 times or 4 times?
This is 4 replications, so we're actually, as we come down, we've got rep 1, rep 2, and then into rep 3 and rep 4 over there. And we've got 3 locations, Lethbridge, Bow Island, and Enchant this year. Yeah.
So I know that all of you wake up every morning wondering how you can help Justin Trudeau meet his climate change goals. Oh, I thought somebody would have thrown a rock at me there. Being nice. You talk about, there's no punchline. That was it. You talk about a crop that has an opportunity to sequester more carbon. Corn is one. I mean, you look at the biomass that it produces, and when we talk about carbon sequestration, we're just talking about really growing more biomass and more plant material. So if policies are put in place where we're needing to increase soil organic matter, sequestering more carbon, so, believe it or not, in some places in the world, you are forced into certain policies like that. Might happen here too. But it's something to keep in mind, like when we're being forced into situations where we need to look at alternative crops that will help sequester carbon. Corn is one. As a C4 crop, it takes full advantage of solar radiation, especially when it's a little bit hotter. It doesn't like it too hot, but it definitely does a better job than the C3 crop. So thinking about that as another component. And the other thing that we don't think about with corn is, you know, in South Dakota, like you were talking about, North Dakota, corn does amazing things in rotation for wheat. So they love what happens to wheat after corn. So it's still, while it's been low in adoption, I do believe that sometimes it's the logistics and the cultural and even the market opportunities within corn that are barriers to adoption. But I still believe that it is a crop of opportunity, one we should be keeping our eyes on, and just being prepared to you know, for the day when we are really forced into different situations within our cropping systems.
So Ken, since you brought up policies, how is the 30% less nitrogen we're allowed to use in 5 years going to affect crop rotation?
So it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That same policy has already been incorporated in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Now they're looking at ways of incorporating living mulches in corn production systems.
Yeah.
So growing in between the rows, nitrogen fixing crops like clover and so on and so on. So that's one of the techniques being used in response to these policy changes. So it really makes you start thinking about the entire nutrient cycling systems and how do you get yourself into a part that's still profitable and allows you to deal with both policy and really high nitrogen fertilizer prices. A good question.
So how's the clover and the nitrogen fixing plants going to compete with a crop that's way taller, is going to be shaded out?
It doesn't, but we showed a trial. We're not showing it today, are we?
Oh,
Okay, so we're
Gabir's
going to
talking
actually
about it,
show
yeah.
a plant a trial with Gretzinger is presenting later on this afternoon. One of the things we're doing is just going on wide row corn. So it's more forage orientated, but it's a 60-inch row corn, so that you actually have a little bit of space for that that crop to survive.
And Ken, if you go to a lot of the countries where only mechanization is still manual, many of these smallholder farmers are growing corn and beans side by side.
Yep.
You know,
so
and just-
intercropping.
Yeah,
kind of thing?
intercropping. That's very probably more acres than we're aware of. That's actually happening, but we just don't hear about it or see it.
Yeah, interesting. So corn is fun.
Corn's great. If I was a farmer, I'd grow hemp and corn. Yeah. I don't know if that's great rotation, but yeah.
Y'all wrapped up that one?
Hail, at least.
That's mostly what I have to say. So unless there's any more questions, we'll probably move over. Carlo can describe that strip till machine and look at our other ones. One more.
Sorry, before,
Yeah.
do you practice winter corn grazing? Yeah.
Winter corn graze. That's a really good question because we also have a
Yes.
project on that. That's kind of the one Gretzinger's presenting on exactly. Yeah.
There is some grazing corn. It actually, believe it or not, happens more towards central Alberta
Yeah.
than here, but there are some instances of it happening here. So
Yeah, but
that's the cool thing about corn is, you know, even if it snows, the crop's above ground. So grazing in the winter works well. They still have access to the cobs. We're kind of more in the main crop production area around here.
Yeah, it's done way in the northeast.
Yep.
Yeah, and then in Saskatchewan, basically both the Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Landingan, Melfort, they are done there.
Yeah, there's been limited adoption of it, but it's still an opportunity, I think. Yeah. Tricky to deal with the residue afterwards, but